Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. One of the things that I missed talking about on the dev server was the fact that the UK ship line was added. Now, in the dev server itself, there wasn't actually the ship line there. The only one which was available to actually test sail on the second dev server was the MTB1 Series 1. And even on the first dev server, that thing would crash a game if you tried to test sail it. But luckily, I was able to show you it in the Mediterranean Sea map. So, we know that the UK ship line has been added to the files, and because of that, a lad called Unknown on the Discord server was able to put together a wonderful PDF that you see before you. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the ships, their file names and what they are, and look at the main things about them. So basically, all of the guns that we find on them, which seems to be the main thing that is different about each ship at the moment. Basically, you have speed, you have guns, does it have torpedoes? That's really about it. So the first one to have a look at is the UK cruiser Enterprise, and this is the light cruiser the British will get. Something to let you know before we get into this, obviously this is all subject to change. This was what is in the dev server files. They could add more, they could take stuff away, but right now this is what we have for the UK ship tech tree. So, UK Cruiser Enterprise, it has 7 6-inch Mark 12 guns on it. It has 3 4-inch AA guns, 8 torpedoes, and then its armor, which is something that for light cruisers actually matters compared to a lot of other stuff. It has a 76mm belt, which is pretty damn good, and then a 38 to 64mm bow, 51mm stern, and the deck itself is 25mm, and then 25mm over the rudder. So, with that said, what we're getting is quite a beefy light cruiser compared to the rest. The guns themselves, 7 large 6-inch guns is nice to see, should do a lot of damage, and the fact that it's able to also get torpedoes means that we should be able to deal with other larger ships while it's going along. One of the problems that I see coming to it is that it can be outgunned by other larger ships, but with the armor that it has, it should be able to shake off a lot of those shots, especially if people are firing HE. Generally, the meta that I've seen, though, is a lot of AP and AP-HE, so that may not help. Overall, though, it's nice to see the Enterprise make it. Then we have the UK Dark Class. Now, I believe the HQ just means high quality. Now, we've already had, like, a dev blog on this thing, which is where Unknown has got some of these pictures from. This has a 40mm on it with 4 21 torpedoes, or it can get a 40mm and a 4.5-inch gun. So do you want to take 4 torpedoes, or do you want to take a 4.5-inch gun? You can see in this model, this is the one with the 4.5-incher right here, and then the 40 on the back. For me personally, when I look at torpedoes and when I look at guns, a lot of the time, the way I see it is that torpedoes scale a hell of a lot better than guns do. What you see from a lot of gunboats is that they're generally pretty good at their BR, but once they get up-tiered, you're just facing ships which have more guns than you. So your gunboat just becomes completely inferior to the next gunboat. But with torpedoes, you have that kind of wild card. You have that idea of, maybe I'll be able to hit this ship, with my torpedoes. It's why a G5 reserve from the Soviets can kill a destroyer or a light cruiser from the Americans or from the Germans. It's something that is really nice about the torpedo in itself. But if you swap those torpedoes for a gun, then you may be slightly better against the stuff you generally fight, but you won't have that up-tier ability which the torpedo gives you. So from the Dark Class, so you can see it's not that big of a ship. It looks very much like a PT boat to me. And I would actually keep the torpedoes instead of switching over to the 4.5-incher. It also depends, obviously, on its BR. Now we get into the first destroyer. Now, the UK are getting a lot of destroyers, which is lovely to see. This is the Battle 2 series. At least that's what it's called in the files. It has a 63 kilometers an hour top speed, and then there's also 2 versions of it. One of the things that you'll find that I've talked about in the past is it really depends on which variant of the same destroyer you pick. One of the problems that we've had with ships is that if I get given a name of a ship, generally ships are around for at least 20 years. So it could be this ship, it could be this with more guns, it could be this with upgraded engines. It could be a lot of different things. And this is the problem we had with the light cruiser that was given to the Americans. I believe it's the light cruiser, it might be one of the destroyers, but I believe it's it might be the Clemson. But anyway, it's one of those larger ships for the Americans. And the one that they gave us, they said is like a mid-1930s version. But when you look at the variants, between in the 30s, it isn't either one of them. So it's some kind of weird mid-version that they've given us. And this is the problem whenever you're speculating about ships. They could just pretty much throw on whatever they wanted. So you have to specify it per year and also per variation, otherwise we start to have some real issues with working out what's going on. So the 1942 version of this destroyer, it had two twin 4.5 inches, one single 4-inch, four twin 40mm Bofors, that's dual Bofors, 4 to 6 single 40mm Bofors mounts, 2 quad tubes of 21-inch torpedoes, 2 depth charge rails, 4 depth charge throwers, and a depth charge later replaced by a Squid AS mortar. That could be a bit of fun. And then the 1943 one, the 2 twin 4.5-inch guns, 1 single 4.5-inch gun, 2 twin 40mm Bofors mounts, and then the 1 twin 40mm Bofors mounts, 2 single 40mm Bofors mounts, 2 quintuple tubes for 21 inches, and also a Squid AS mortar. So on the first version, you get you get less torpedoes, you get around about the same amount of AA fire. I think it would be easy to say, because on the second version, let's see, you have 2 twin 40mm Bofors and a 1 twin 40mm, so that is 6, 7, 8. So it has 8 40mm Bofors. The first one has 8 plus 4, so either 12 or 14 40mm Bofors, but they are in different ways, and they're also different types of Bofors. So we're going to have to see which one has more AA. I would say it's probably kind of the same. Maybe you edge it on the 42 version. Obviously, the main guns are exactly the same. And then, let's see. And then the tubes, so the second version gets more torpedoes, and it gets less depth charges. So if we're looking at which one is going to be more useful in game, I mean, they both have the same main armament, and if we're talking about killing ships, I think the second version will be better just because it has more torpedo tubes, and generally torpedo tubes is what you want instead of AA. If you want to survive against aircraft, I'm pretty sure 8 40mm Bofors is good enough, but if you want that extra power, then of course you want to go for the 1942 one. Basically what we have from this ship is something that's going to be incredibly good at killing anything that's in the air, and with 5 main battle guns, with the 2 twin 4.5s and 1 single 4, it should be completely fine against the destroyers that it's going to fight. The torpedo tubes are basically the only difference compared to other ships, and if we see the mountings, the main guns are obviously on the front of it. So you have the main guns on the front, the 4.5s, then you have everything else in the booty. So you could actually just run at ships, and if you stay, like this, then obviously they have less of a target to hit you, and you can easily hit them. At the same time, this may make your torpedoes not as useful, but overall, it's basically what we see with the Krasny, where the Krasny can just run at you with all of its crazy guns. I'm pretty sure this destroyer, which is labelled as the Battle 2 series, should be able to do it as well. Now we get another Clemson. So this is the UK destroyer, the Clemson Churchill. I believe we already have a Clemson in game, or at least something very similar to the Clemson in the American tree. It has 4 4-inches, 102mm, 1 3-incher, 76, and torpedo tubes. So there's no real AA defense in this thing, so this will probably be the first destroyer. The guns themselves, I mean, it's nice to have 4 inches, but against aircraft, they should absolutely annihilate this thing, as long as it doesn't have any supports. The fact that it gets a ton of torpedo tubes, 4x3s, is lovely to see. I think torpedoes are a really cool mechanic, and it's what separates, ships from other stuff such as tanks and aircraft. Because tanks and aircraft, they have the same mechanics of, shooty, killy, but they each have their own little individual mechanics behind that. With aircraft, you have rockets, for tanks you have ATGMs, even though that's changing really rapidly. But in tanks you also have, the terrain and things like that play a massive part in how you shooty, killy. Now, with ships, I think the difference is obviously the torpedoes and the depth charges. Right now I don't see much of a use in the depth charges, so therefore we have to focus on the torpedoes. But yeah, this UK destroyer will be fine against all of the first rank destroyers. The issue is with the BRs. Why would you take this over one of the other destroyers? Because guess what? You're going to be fighting them and they're going to annihilate you. Just is how it is. But overall, it's going to be an interesting and fun machine. Very similar to the American one. Then we have the UK destroyer, the G Grafton. It has 4.7 inches, 120s on it, so big guns. Two quad 50 cals, and then 2 quad 21 inches, and 20 depth charges, 1 rail, and 2 throwers. Does it have anything else? No. So this will probably be the second of the UK destroyers. It is slightly up-armamented from the one we saw above it. It has 2 main guns on the front, and I believe 1 in the center and 1 in the back, but don't quote me on that if I'm looking at this picture correctly. The main thing that this has over the one above it is, as I said, slightly up armament. When it comes to the main guns, it has some AA supports, which the other one does not, apart from the 3-incher. And then, of course, the torpedo tubes. So it loses some torpedoes, which for me is no bueno, but it does gain some AA supports. And these destroyers are large machines. They do need to be able to knock out all of the aircraft in the area, otherwise, well, you're just going to get battered by them over and over again. Then we have the Haida. This is the UK destroyer. It's much more modern than the other ones that we've seen, and you'll see why. So the 1943-52 version, so this will be seen as the World War II version. I've actually talked about this machine before. The 3 4.7 inches, they are twin guns, 1 4-incher. It's 3 4-inches and then 1 4-incher, a quadruple mounted 40, the 620mm Oerlikons, a quad launcher with Mark 9 torpedoes, and then once again some depth charges. So a lot of damage in there, but the main focus compared to the other destroyers we've seen is once again AA. A quadruple mounted 40 plus 6 20mm Oerlikons. I'll be incredibly surprised if any aircraft ever gets near this thing. And the only time something gets near this thing is if the destroyer player is not paying attention. I don't like scenarios where I have to rely on an enemy team's incompetence, especially since I can't read their mind. So with that said, this thing should absolutely annihilate any light craft and also annihilate any aircraft in the vicinity. And then the DD-215, it had 2 4-inches, 1 3-incher, 4 40mm Bofors, a quad launcher of torpedoes, and also the ASW mortar, the Squids. So, with that said, this, to me, is probably going to be the version we're going to see in game, because it's not as heavily armed when it comes to aircraft. One of the problems we're seeing with a lot of these machines is the fact that they're absolutely annihilating anything that's in the air. And what I'm talking about is the second and third cruiser, or the last cruiser, like the Project 7U of most lines, destroyers of most lines, and then the light cruiser. They're just annihilating any aircraft, and the only time the aircrafts even get close is when the person or people piloting or steering or commanding, I suppose, the destroyers don't see them coming or are just not paying attention. And with that said, my guess is we're going to go much more further, whether it is through crew skills or whether it is through which ships they actually add to the game. away from ships just being able to annihilate anything in the air. If that's not the case, though, and they decide to go for the first version, which is definitely more powerful than the second version, then we'll have to see. I think it'll be a bit more fun. So this is the N-class destroyer as well. As you can see, the British are getting a lot of destroyers, and I'm very happy about that, because they are the actual fun machines when it comes to, top tier. If you're not in a destroyer or a light cruiser, don't bother. Like, if you're in a hydrofoil or something like that and you're facing these things, you'll know what I mean. You'll be like, why aren't I in a destroyer? Pretty much that. So this was preceded by the Tribal Haida class destroyer. It has 3 dual 4.7 inches, 4 2-pounder anti-aircraft guns, 4 dual 50 calibers, and then some torpedo tubes, and then depth charges as well. There's a lot of depth charges on these destroyers, which is lovely. If they're represented in game or not, we'll have to see. I feel like there has to be a reason to use depth charges. The only time... it's very easy to clip moments where depth charges have been used, interestingly. Like, there's a few GIFs and a few clips of people using them to annihilate destroyers, right? Being able to... go right up to them and just throw their depth charges on board. Now, how useful is this against the majority of players? Absolutely not useful at all, but, it's a cool clip. Hopefully we see something that actually gives depth charges a reason to exist. But when it comes to the guns, once again, very similar to the others, lots of firepower on these destroyers. They are shaping up to be good. And then the anti-aircraft as well is pretty nice. The only issue with this destroyer is that there is no secondary massive armament. Your secondary massive armament is 2-pounders, where on the other machines, if we go up a little bit, you can see these have 4 inches and 3 inches of secondary armaments. And then we have the Tribal HQ, which is another destroyer. This has the same armament as the Haida, so this one here, so it can have either or. So look forward to that. Then we have some of the smaller machines, which is what I'm personally going to be having fun with. The fun that I've had in Naval Forces has been the Rank 1 and Rank 2. Now that they've moved up the LCS, I think it's going to be a hell of a lot more fun. But basically an arcade with all these small boats, like, zipping around like crazy. It's been great. It's been a lot more fun than the top tier stuff that I've played, so I'm very much happy with the fact that we're getting some of these interesting UK smaller ships. So the Fairmile, or the Fairmile, this is the ML100 version. It has 1 3-pounder Hotchkiss, and then it has a pair of Lewis machine guns and 12 depth charges. So this would be a very, very, very early gunboat from the British. 1 3-pounder and a pair of Lewis machine guns is not going to be very enticing for anybody, and since it doesn't even have torpedoes, I can't see this thing being played that much. It's going to have to be incredibly low BR for people to even think about it. And then we have the UK Fairmile BML 345. This has a 3-pounder Hotchkiss. Once again, you can see it on the front there in the picture. It has twin 303 machine guns again and 12 depth charges. So exactly the same armament as the other one. So have luck trying to grind through that with the 3-pounder. I suppose it really depends on what ammo it gets. If it's fast firing and it gets AP, then yeah, it'll be alright. The issue is if it gets that AP. The next one is the Fairmile C, and as you can see here, it's got a lot more guns on it, so this is where we're actually getting to the point where it's starting to compete with some of those Soviet gunboats. So a 2-pounder, and then it has a Rolls-Royce 2-pounder Mark 14 gun, then it has 4 Vickers 12.7s, and then it also has 4 Vickers 303s, and they're all in dual mounts. You can see them in the center there. Once again, what seems to be missing from a lot of these ships, because this seems to be an armament that you would find on an American PT boat, But for the UK one, you don't have torpedoes, so you don't have that extra bit of flexibility. So you're sat with the gunboat, which is underpowered compared to a lot of other gunboats out there. Obviously, we're going to have to see the BRs, though. The BRs are the important thing. But anyway, the later version had 2 2-pounders, then 2 to 4 20mm, 1 to 2 20mm, and 4 depth charges. So that could be pretty cool. The issue is, the one that's pictured right here is the early version. So get used to not having a lot of guns. As simple as that, really. Hopefully we do get a later version. If we don't get a later version, then this will be another very low BR vehicle. Now we're getting to a slightly bigger Mamba Jamba. This is the Fairmile D-215. It has 2 6-pounder guns, 4 20mm Oerlikons, 1 twin, and then 2 singles, 2 twin 303 Vickers Ks, and 4 light boat depth charges, a searchlight of all things, and a smoke generator. I wonder if they'll ever implement searchlights. I mean, they've been kind of, like in tanks, a lot of people have been asking for headlights for a long time. I personally don't really see the point in them unless you want to do them in cinematics and stuff. And I don't really see the point in ships either, so we're probably not going to see them. You can see the twin Vickers here. You can see the 20mm here. You can see what I believe is a single 6-pounder on the front and one on the back, even though it looks a little bit odd. So the configuration of the guns is nice. Still struggling for those torpedoes, though. We haven't seen a single smaller ship so far which has torpedoes. And then we have the Fairmile D-697-800. This has 2 single 6-pounders again, one on the front, one on the back, and then 4 20mm Oerlikons, 2 twin 303s, and 4 light boat depth charges. So very, very similar to the one we saw before. This seems to be the normal configuration for what we're going to see around about the BR2. My guess is UK ships when it comes to the battle boats, the ones with all the guns on them. Now we have the UK Flower class, which is a slightly larger battle boat, and it has a 4-incher single gun. It has 2 Vickers 50s, 2 303 Lewis guns. These are twins, by the way. And then you have 2 depth charge throwers and a depth charge rails with 40 depth charges. So once again, no torpedoes, but at least some interesting guns. 4-incher on the front of it is pretty nice. I would say this is very similar to I believe it's a 110-footer from the American side of things. So around about that 2.3, 2.0 BR. Maybe even 2.7, depending on how well it does. But once again, lacking torpedoes, which is very sad. Then we have the UK Isle class Trawler, which looks cool with an interesting camouflage. It has the QF 12-pounder anti-aircraft gun, so the 76mm, then 3 20mm Oerlikons. Something tells me that 12-pounder is not going to be used for killing aircraft. It's going to be used much more for annihilating anything in front of it. Once again, a bunch of depth charges. Really hope depth charges get something to do. Then we have the MTB 1 series, or the MTB 1 series. Already done a video on it, and if you want to see some stuff of it being actually in the game, go and watch the Mediterranean Sea video I did on the second dev server, because there I'm actually, sailing it around and everything. That's going to be the reserve vehicle with the 8 Lewis guns in sets of quads. As you can see, it's actually kind of interesting how they're set up. You have 2 on the top, and then flipped, you have 2 on the bottom. It also has access to 2 torpedoes, which is nice. It's the first one we've seen which actually has torpedoes. Now we get on to some of the other torpedo boats, though. This is the MTB Vosper 1 series. It has 4 18-inch torpedoes, lovely to see. A 20mm Oerlikon, and 2 303 Vickers K machine guns, or optionally 2 Vickers 50 machine guns. So maybe that could be an upgraded modification. But you can see where the 303s are. I can't really see on the picture here where the 20mm is, but my guess is that it would either be sat on the front where the dinghy is, or the back where the propellers are. So with that all said, this boat hopefully is fast, and if we scroll down a little bit, you can see it's 74 kilometers an hour. So it doesn't really have a lot on stuff like the G5, but it should be pretty close. This should be very similar to the American PT boats that we see, so therefore they can be up-tiered well, and you can have a bit of fun in them. But if this thing's BR is quite low, which it might be, that 20mm should tear stuff apart, which will be fun. The next one is the MTB Vosper 2 series. This has two 18-inch torpedo tubes, even though this model has 4. You have a 6-pounder, 57mm, 20mm Oerlikon, and two 303 Vickers MGs. So this is a good mix. There's a few of the later tier PT boats that the Americans have. There's the green one, the bright green one, which I decided not to make a video on because battle boats were just annihilating me. And this seems to be the British version of that. Something that has a good mix of everything. You know, has a 6-pounder, has a 20mm, but it also has access to torpedoes. These are the ones you're going to take into destroyer matches and try and annihilate destroyers with. Once again, very nippy. The next one is the SGB 304, and it has 64.82 knots, so a very speedy boy, if that's right. It has a 76.2mm, then two single 6-pounder guns and two twin 40mm. So this is the British LCS. It has, instead of dual 40s, it has dual 20s. So in my estimation, this will be probably around 2.7. And it's quite fast, but once again, no torpedoes. This is going to be the British battle boat. I'll be incredibly surprised if this is the one that people don't use to try and grind through the rest, just because it has the most guns and it has the most firepower, and it should be the hardest to kill because of its size. Also, the last one that he throws in here is called UK Ship BQ. And it's hard to tell if this is a base file or not. The thing that I'm thinking is that all of these have HQ after them, which I'm guessing means high quality, and then BQ is going to be like the ultra-low versions, but that's just speculation. Overall, what we see from all of these ships is that we are going to get a tree from the UK, which is very similar to the US tree, but slightly undergunned compared to the US tree. And I'm completely fine with that. A lot of these boats seem really fun to me. The fact that we get a ton of destroyers is really nice, even though some of the destroyers will be useless compared to some of the other ones. That's just how the trade goes, unfortunately. But overall, I'm very happy that the UK fleet is coming. It's something I've looked forward to for a long time. Being British, it's something to be very prideful for. When they added in, a lot of the RAF machines back in the day, when they added in, the British ground vehicles, it does make you feel good. And I understand from a national pride point of view, the feeling of, yes, we're getting our own thing. So I hope eventually we'll get the Italians, we'll get the French, and we'll get the Japanese, and I'm sure we will very soon for the ships, because they said that they wanted to get the nations out before CBT ends. And they said that CBT will go into next year, so hopefully maybe about half a year or so we'll hit OBT. Obviously that's speculation, I don't know exactly, but that's my guess. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.